We've got the mid-season mock draft coming up. We're going to talk about the top 16 projected for this 2024 NHL draft, all coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High, and we've got a big one for you today. We're doing the mid-season mock draft. We're going to be breaking down the top 16 of this draft, talking about the prospects that could go to each team available. We kept it simple. We just went with points percentage in the standings. Don't want to keep it too complicated. Try to do a lottery simulation and all that stuff. We'll just go with the teams in their order right now. So San Jose is on the board first, and we've got Chicago. After that, we have got Anaheim, Ottawa, and Columbus for the top 5. Then Minnesota, Buffalo, Montreal, Calgary, and St. Louis in that order figure out the top 10. And then in our final segment, we'll do the two picks 11 to 16. That's Arizona, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Nashville. So we'll go in that order. Before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So I think we can get things started with number 1, and that will be San Jose. Our Locked On host, JD Young, will be very, very happy to know that they won the non-lottery. So we can start off with number 1, and I think there's no debate at all here. It's Macklin Celebrini, right?
Really? No way. No way San Jose just picks the obvious BPA here, best player available. I mean, Celebrini is the obvious pick, of course. I think we don't have to spend too much time here because everyone who I think would listen to this episode kind of is already familiar with Macklin Celebrini, what makes him a special talent in this draft class. But here San Jose would get a slam dunk number 1 center that can kind of just do it all. He can be your transition driver. He can be your creative force in the offensive zone. He can be your trigger man in the offensive zone. He can be your two-way defensive forward if you need him to be. He can do pretty much anything you ask of him. So he's a fairly easy slot here at number 1.
Absolutely. And a 1-2 punch of Macklin Celebrini and William Eklund just seems unfair at center. So I'm really excited to see that happen if it does. I think we can move on quickly from Celebrini. He's without a doubt the best prospect in this draft, and whoever picks it one is picking Celebrini as winning this lottery. And there's a significant gap, I'd say, between him and the rest of the draft, but still some decent options after 1. So let's go to Chicago at 2nd overall. This is not by the way, this is a mock draft. This is not the players that we have in that order. And definitely not the players that we would take in these positions. We're going off what the teams need, what the teams are likely to pick, and who is touted in the draft cycle. Now this year, Artyom Levshunov is probably the player that Chicago goes with at 2nd overall. And I'm fine with this. I think that, at the end of the day, Levshunov's probably not going to leave the top 4, like for sure. If you're picking 5th overall, he wouldn't be available. And I think based on that, Chicago's getting the player that they need in this position. They have Kevin Korchinski on the left side. They need a D partner for him long term. And I feel like Levshunov really fits that bill. And yeah, he's a player who is really, really toolsy. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he's skilled with the puck. He can make some decent moves from the blue line. And has a bomb of a shot. But the main setback with Levshunov is the decision-making. He's pretty raw in terms of his decision-making, and it's normal. I mean, he was playing under 16 in Belarus up until like 18 months ago. Like it's part of the process. Like he still has a lot to learn, but I feel like with a decent couple of years in the NCAA post-draft, you can get that up to par. You can get some really good coaching in and understand the intricacies of how to make decisions at a pro level. He's definitely not there yet, but like I said, it's really hard to go from U16 in Belarus to the NCAA in 18 months and look good. And he's at a point per game right now, which is pretty impressive. And
Not bad.
everything I've heard of him outside of the production and the games and all that, like everything off ice has been really, really good. Like he's putting in a lot of work off the ice. In training and practice, really, staying an hour and a half after practices to keep, training and working hard. So he's got the drive, he's got a motivation, and yeah, he makes sense here for Chicago. But then at third overall with Anaheim, we've got Caden Lindstrom, a favorite of both of ours.
Indeed.
Take it away on Lindstrom. He's really fun, eh?
He's really fun, and I think it has to be noted just how wide open this draft class becomes after that first overall pick. Like
Yeah.
Levshunov, we have slot in at 2 for Chicago because it makes positional sense, and he's likely going to go in that range. But there were any number of like 7 possibilities for that draft selection. It is far more open at this stage of the draft cycle than most drafts usually are, and that may shift by the time that June comes around. But right now, it's still a bit of a whirlwind. But Caden Lindstrom for Anaheim is just funny. It is amusing and funny because it would represent Anaheim just doubling down on what they're already accumulating like hoarders, which is really skilled, really big physical forwards that are an absolute pain to play against in all 3 zones, which they will continue to do here with Caden Lindstrom after acquiring Cutter Gauthier via trade and recently picking Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish, who are right up that alley as well. Lindstrom can also play at center, but he's a capable winger as well. He would continue to add positional versatility to Anaheim's lineup, which they have really shown a desire to move towards, to really maximize in-game flexibility in terms of line mixing and also flexibility when injuries rise up, which they certainly have this season for Anaheim. So it's already kind of paying some dividends. But Caden Lindstrom makes a ton of sense because of just how versatile he is, just how elite he is on the puck. He's a tremendous puck protector, really, really lethal shot, but a capable playmaker as well, who just elevates his line mates consistently. He makes everyone around him better. He is a high-end play driver. He wants the puck on his stick. He wants to dictate the pace of play. And the more players like that Anaheim can accumulate, I think they will. And I think in that sense, Lindstrom makes sense here. But again, any number of possibilities in this slot.
Absolutely. They could have gone defenseman, but honestly, at this stage, your top rate D is gone. Your top options are probably all left-handed defensemen at this point. So it makes more sense for them to accumulate another one of these players that they're really fond of and that really usually work out well. I mean, Mason McTavish is playing fantastic hockey. Leo Carlson's doing really good in his rookie year. Like that route is looking good for them. Then fourth overall, we've got the Ottawa Senators, and I think they go Cole Eiserman here. I think that this is a logical choice for them at this point. They need scoring. They need players who can potentially play besides players like Tim Stützle long term. And Cole Eiserman is the definition of a goal scorer. Like that's the thing he does. It's just, we talk about this a lot. Cole Eiserman is a player who you feel like he's put all his skill tree points into goal scoring and positioning, and like all the rest is basically empty. And it's, he has regressed recently. I will say that. It's been a bit more difficult to watch him in all 3 zones. Once he gets to the offensive zone, he does what he does, and he does it really well. But heading into the offensive zone, it's really difficult. And yeah, he's spent stints on the third line with the NTDP and all that, but I don't think any of that stops Ottawa. They'll see a big, strong winger who can just fire the puck like no one else in this draft, and they'll jump on that occasion because a team like Ottawa needs scoring. So I would not be surprised at all to see Eiserman go at 4th overall. And he seems to still be liked in NHL circles from what I'm hearing, even though the NHL Central Scouting list has him kind of a bit lower in their list. I think he's at 8th in their North American skaters list, something like that. I don't think that'll stop Ottawa. They really need goal scoring, and they'll jump on the occasion to add the best goal scorer in this draft, without a doubt here. And then to end things off for our top 5, Columbus, the Columbus Blue Jackets pick Konsta Helenius at 5th overall. I feel like this is just a really, really good fit for Columbus. There are some other options that they could go for that are a bit higher risk swings. But Helenius is showing more and more in Liga what his offensive upside is, on top of just consistently being one of the best defensive players on his team night in, night out. And Columbus has defensemen galore. They've got a decent amount of offensive forwards. You look at the Ken Johnsons and the Cole Sillingers and those kind of guys. Like, they need a player who can support them defensively and support them with good playmaking. And Hellenius just fits that bill perfectly. So yeah, it's just a perfect fit here at 5. And I'm not against it. Like personally, I was talking with Jay Forster earlier today, the host of Locked On Blue Jackets, and I was talking about how Ivan Demidov would be the best swing here, and I still believe he is. But in terms of fit, in terms of organizational needs, and especially in terms of what they like out of players, I feel like Hellenius is probably the best fit here and the most likely choice. And I'm not against it. Like Constant Hellenius is in my top 5, so we're good with this. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We're going to go through picks 6 through 10 in our second segment. That's Minnesota, Buffalo, Montreal, Calgary, and St. Louis, all coming up after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
The NFL's regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, that you can use on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and more. Whether you want to bet on your favorite team to win the Super Bowl or your favorite quarterback to throw for a couple of touchdowns in the next game, the choice is yours. I personally really enjoy using FanDuel for in-game, like single-game parlays, where I can make multiple bets for a single game, especially when I'm actually attending that game to make the action all the more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll go for picks 6 through 10. Again, that's Minnesota, Buffalo, Montreal, Calgary, and St. Louis in that order. So let's start off with Minnesota, and we made this pick with the idea of what a ridiculous first pairing defense that would be. Minnesota already has Brock Faber, and at 6 overall, we think they'll add Sam Dickinson out of the London Knights in the OHL, a big really smooth skating left-handed defenseman who is slowly but surely developing an offensive upside, along with being probably the best defensive defenseman in this draft. For me, it's a no-brainer here at 6. It makes a lot of sense for Minnesota and fits a need long-term for them that could give them a top pairing for the next 10, 15 years, right?
For sure. Definitely a top pairing, but like just a projected analytical darling of a top pairing, especially in terms of defensive metrics. Like Brock Faber is, I mean, of course, he's in the Calder race for good reason. He's playing some elite defensive hockey, playing almost 25 minutes a night as an NHL rookie, which is just stupid. And Sam Dickinson could probably do something similar in a couple years' time. So I think if you pair those two together, both are very intelligent players, both like the puck on their stick, but are also always very open to deferring to their partners when they need to. So having both of those players really using each other as outlets when they are pressured would also project very nicely as a balanced and very intelligent top pairing. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Minnesota.
Absolutely. And I love the fit here because, I don't see a lot of left-handed defensemen in their roster that really makes sense long term. Whereas at forward, they have a lot of really young, good forwards like Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, and a lot more. So yeah, I mean, Minnesota's really well set for the next couple of years if they add a responsible, reliable defenseman to go along with Brock Faber and just play some really, really good defensive hockey and just basically set up those forwards, those skilled young forwards, to just wreak havoc in the offensive zone for the next 10 years. Like, this is going to be a really fun team with time and with patience, of course. But moving on to Buffalo, who already have a fantastically stacked roster, both on offense and on defense. And, at right D, which is probably their biggest need, I don't see a lot of really good fits here. And if they do take a player like Carter Yakimchuk, I think that's going to come back to bite them, and I think they know this. So I think we both agree here the best fit for Buffalo here at 7th overall is a player that I don't think we can let slip further than this, and I don't think any team should. The 7th overall, Buffalo takes Ivan Demidov, probably the most purely skilled player from this draft. In terms of raw skill, off the charts, ridiculous. He can stick handle through multiple layers without a problem, and he's constantly, he's a pure improviser, right? Like he gets the puck and just, there's no plan, there's no game plan. He just basically goes into He goes into situations with no idea of what he's going to do, which makes it even more difficult for opponents to figure out what he's going to do. So he just stick handles through checks really easily, and always finds a way to make a pass through a layer. For a player with that good of a stick handling brain, he also translates that really well to his playmaking and goal scoring games, which are really well supported by his playmaking. So overall, the offensive skill set is ridiculous for Demidov. Defensively, he's had some really good flashes, and it's not consistent yet, but I feel like it could develop into something really, really good for Demidov. His skating is, the output is way better than the input, that's for sure. Like, he has a bit of a weird stride, but he's constantly outpacing opponents. He's constantly protecting pucks really well, and like figuring ways to like solve problems and get himself out of pressure. So like the lack of perfect skating stride isn't really harming his game either. So just overall, there's so much to love about Demidov's game, and I think at 7th overall, it just makes a lot of sense. And then we got Montreal at 8. There are a lot of options here, but I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to go for their usual pick of character and drive and motor and skill and physicality, and they're going to go Liam Greentree at 8th overall. Greentree is playing really, really good hockey for, I believe, Windsor in the OHL. He was just named their captain after they traded theirs, which adds to the layers of character and leadership and all that stuff that they really love. On top of just being a really, really good goal scorer, a really good off-puck mover, a really good playmaker. Like, yeah, there's so much to love here with Greentree at 8, right?
There's a lot to love with Greentree. I think that he'd be a player that Habs fans specifically would embrace pretty quickly once they see the on-ice product in the NHL. He is a really, really easy to respect player, especially in the offensive zone. He gets to the dirty areas consistently. He's a real menace to play against. OHL defenses are regularly overwhelmed by his combination of pace and physicality and snarl and skill. And he has a wicked release, which he's learning to really use better in terms of accessing space in order to really have space to get it off. Like, he's quite good at getting it off in tight, but he's starting to realize just how lethal it is when he does have time and space. And that's a pretty dangerous thing for the OHL to start to reckon with now. But he probably does not represent the upside swing that many Habs fans might hope for. Like, this is not a player who's likely going to top out as a first liner. It's probably more of a second line projection. But which of course the Habs already have a fair amount out of. But at the same time, he really represents what this organization has been quite verbally and also in terms of what their actions been showing that they desire, what they value, what they want to have more of in the organization. So I think that Greentree is a decent balance of realism with also like the team's needs and what they really want to add to become a contending team.
Absolutely. But moving on to 9th overall in the Calgary Flames, I think we've got our first really, really fun pick of this draft, and that is Tij Iginla at 9th overall to the Calgary Flames. Definitely higher than we both have him. But I think the Calgary Flames are looking for something to give fans, a little candy for the tooth, that kind of thing.
Fans need something.
Yeah, and I think Tij Iginla really brings that. He's a really good goal scorer. He goes to the dirty areas. He works his way out of trouble. He's learned to move off the puck a lot better than he did last year with the Seattle Thunderbirds out of these in Kelowna playing with Andrew Crystal. There's a decent improvement in his game overall. He's gotten really good at working off of players and showcasing a bit more of that high-end skill set. He looked more like a complementary goal scoring, hardworking, forechecking type of guy with Seattle when he was playing in their bottom six as a freshman, as a rookie rather. But now this year, playing with Andrew Crystal and being part of that kind of driving force on Kelowna offensively, you can really see that he has that high-end skill set. And I'm not against this pick at 9. Like, even if it is a reach, it's a decent reach to take on a player who has his defensive deficiencies. Like, he's not a player who's going to give you a lot defensively, but overall, like, the offensive game is really impressive. And I think at his best, if he's developed perfectly, I think Iginla could score an easy 30 to 35 goals in the NHL and be a really good player long-term for Calgary. But moving on to St. Louis, they don't have a lot on defense. So we're thinking right-handed D, especially because apart from Theo Lindstein, who even then is not really high-end in terms of upside, there's not much to talk about here. We think St. Louis goes for Carter Yakimchuk, the right-handed defenseman playing in Calgary in the WHL, really good offensively. Really toolsy, big, strong, really fluid skater. But again, another prospect whose decision making is still far from NHL ready. It's gotten better a tiny bit. There are flashes from time to time of really good decision making, but we're not at 10th overall personally yet. We're just saying that St. Louis will go for this, especially given the NHL Central Scouting list that just came out. He's highly touted, and we understand why. So I think St. Louis goes this direction. And yeah, I mean, it just makes sense for St. Louis here to have a right-handed defenseman, and outside of him, it's a bit dry in terms of right-handed D unless you go for Zayne Parekh, who we think is going to slip a tiny bit due to the issues surrounding his game, and Central Scouting gave us a good idea of what NHL scouts think of this. So yeah, that wraps things up for our second segment. Now, before we get into our third, a quick message from our sponsors over at Jace Medical. I know we came to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's talk for a minute about really preparing for real life and the realities of it. So, according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is obviously very scary for a lot of families, especially families with people who are immunocompromised. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if one of my family members or one of my friends got sick. Well, a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication that they need. Thankfully, we're okay because we have Jace Medical. The Jace Medical offers the Jace case, among other things. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial infections, ear infections, sinus infections, respiratory infections, anything you have that requires antibiotics is usually and mostly covered by the Jace case and its pack of antibiotics. So you can visit jacemedical.com. All you have to do is just complete a physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and then your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular costs. It's never been more important to be prepared than today, and to stay on top of supply chain issues. So visit jacemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your first order. Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, we'll go through picks 11 through 16 in the 2024 NHL mock draft of the midseason. Let's start off with pick number 11, and that's the Arizona Coyotes. And I don't think there's any doubt here. If this player is available at 11, Arizona will be clawing at the carpet, running their way to the stage to pick him. And it's Anton Salayev, the 6'7" tree of a defenseman. And just he's exactly their mold of player. Like, this is the type of player that Arizona loves. You just look at their picks from last year, and was there a player under 6'3" that they selected? I don't think there was.
I think one. I think there was one. Yeah.
Something like that. But like their first 2 picks of the draft were Dmitry Simashev, who's also like 6'6", and Daniil Boot, who's like 6'5". So like they like their big boys, and yeah, I think that Anton Salayev would be a great fit here. Even though like you look at Simashev versus Salayev, I don't think you can make that a first pair. I think one of them's a first pairing, the other is a second pairing defenseman, and I think we both agree that Simashev is probably the better of the two.
Yes.
But I don't think they'll pass over the opportunity to pick up another big boy, and this is the big boy from this draft. So like, there's no doubt here. Really good defensively. Absolutely. Really good defensively, really good skating. I think at his best, he can be the best gap closer in all of world hockey.
He's very good at that.
Yeah, but he has some weird decisions with the puck, like really, really weird ones. So he's gotten a bit better at that. You see a bit more giving goes from the blue line. You see a bit more moving into space and kind of hitting players in stride right away. Like sometimes, especially when the options are in front of him and very clear, he hits them really quick and really accurately. But as soon as things get a bit complicated, as soon as he has 2 layers of pressure, as soon as he has a player in front of him and a player behind him, with the puck, it gets a bit difficult. But yeah, I think this is something that you can either work out or kind of work around with Salayev, especially given his very particular toolkit. I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes kind of a long-term top 4 defenseman. And at 6'7", like he's going to be adored by NHL teams. But moving on to Tampa Bay at 12, I think that there's no doubt about this. Tampa Bay goes with Zeev Buium. If he's available at 12, Tampa Bay's not passing him up. He's right up their alley, right?
He really is. I mean, Zeev Buium really showed at the World Juniors what he's all about, which he has been showing in the NCAA with Denver as well all season long. But the platform and the audience, the size of like the amount of people that saw him perform at such a high level at the World Juniors is just unparalleled. And yeah, I think that's going to rocket up his draft stock. And Tampa Bay has a track record of picking slightly undersized, like an inch or two smaller than the NHL ideal in terms of size, players who fall to them and who are often developed in the USA. Like we've seen this a lot, especially in the last like 4 or 5 drafts, that Tampa's been prioritizing American like developed players, like thinking back to like 2 drafts ago with Isaac Howard in the first round. And I think that Zeev Buium makes a lot of sense for them. Of course, in terms of like defense, I think that Tampa could use some revitalization. Like Victor Hedman isn't going to play forever, sadly. Yeah. And Zeev Buium could play a lot of minutes for Tampa Bay. And he has the combination that I think that they're really going to appreciate of high-end skill, high-end smarts, high-end escapability, which plays right into their style of play of high pace and direct passing and possession style hockey. And I think Zeev Buium would be a very intriguing option here at 12 for them.
Oh, for sure. 100%. But moving on to 13th overall, the Detroit Red Wings. We think they're going to pick Berkly Catton, a really, really good winger out of the WHL. He's a bit undersized, but extremely, extremely skillful, extremely dynamic. And, you know, if it was up to us, he'd be in the top 10. Closer to 5 than to 10, actually. Like, he's really, really good. But we understand that teams have their preferences, teams have their favorites in the draft, and we understand why Berkly Catton could slip in this draft to 13th. And if any team's going to pick him up as a faller, it's going to be Detroit. Like, they need their dynamic, skilled players to play with them long term. Obviously, they've got Lucas Raymond, who's going to be there for a long time. They got Marco Kasper, who's going to be playing there for a long time. Kasper especially is a bit more that forechecker type of, you know, really smart off the puck, decent with it, but mostly what you get from him is more of the intangible. So pairing a Berkly Catton with a Marco Kasper long term, I think is a great fit. And yeah, just a player that skill set wise you can't pass over once you get to 13, and I think Detroit will identify that fairly quickly. But moving on to 14th, I think what will be probably the steal of the draft here would be Zayne Parekh at 14th overall to the Seattle Kraken. Seattle has interest in picking this player because on right D, they've got a couple options, but nothing really overwhelming. Vince Dunn is looking fantastic for them. And I think that Zayne Parekh long term can really slot in next to him and do a fantastic job. Parekh is a really, really good offensive defenseman. He can move the puck extremely well. He has amazing decision-making on the puck. His breakout passing, his in-zone passing, his bomb of a shot, his stick handling, and just his overall offensive brain is ridiculous. The defensive game is still a work in progress, but honestly, it's improved over the last year, which gives promise. And that's part of why we have Zayne Parekh as high as we do. I mean, we both have him, at 3rd overall, something like that? So
currently, yeah.
Yeah, he's really, really, really good. And the upside with him is sky high. It's just, I understand that, from what I understand, teams do not like the defensive side of his game to the point where they're really worried that they're going to be getting another Ryan Merkley or, Eric Brandstrom, or, players are themselves. They're not their archetypes. And Zayne Parekh has a much higher translatability to his game than Ryan Merkley does. Because if Ryan Merkley was as good offensively as Zayne Parekh was at the same age, Ryan Merkley would be in the NHL full time. No matter how bad his defensive game was, it wouldn't matter because his offensive game is up there, right? It's the reason why Erik Karlsson has had such a lucrative career. He's just that good offensively. It doesn't matter, if he turns a puck or two over, he's going to make 20 high danger passes a game. It's just, And I feel like it's going to be the same as Zayne Parekh. It's inevitable that he makes the NHL. But at 15, we've got Michael Brenzek-Newgard going to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Michael Brenzek-Newgard, I thought, was a player that was going to up his stock in the draft at the World Juniors, but it's actually dropped a bit from what I've heard around the NHL. People who are more connected. What's your take on Brenzek-Newgard, and is this too low for him, or is it right around where he should be?
It's the bottom end of his range. I wouldn't be shocked if he fell this far, especially if there's extra doubts based off of the World Juniors, which is a bit strange to me personally. I like that he showed a different side to his game at the World Juniors than he's shown at the Allsvenskan. I like that he's able to show that he has versatility, that he can be in a very much offensive leaning goal scorer rather than your high end defensive winger. And his defensive performances were not the best at the World Juniors, but he was playing for Norway, which of course comes with an asterisk. And he's been showing off his defensive ability against professionals this entire season so far. So I don't think he's really had to prove that, or his engagement or effort levels. I think those have been well established as well. So if he fell this far, I think it'd be a bit lower than where he likely should be going. But I think Pittsburgh would be very happy snapping him up. Like,
Yeah.
Brandstad Newgard is the type of player that Pittsburgh has perennially been looking to go after to kind of insulate the elite skill that they have, which is of course like 38 years old on average right now. But
Yeah.
I think that mold, that philosophy of having like two standout elite players on offense and then some really smart and versatile players on their wings to support them might actually outlive the Crosby and Malkin era, where you'll see them start to tank, try to get those high-end pieces, but that might start to try stocking up on those surrounding peripheral high-end and versatile pieces, which MBN fits into beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we end things off at 16th overall with the Nashville Predators. And we heard Barry Trotz say to his draft team, take some big swings. And this is exactly what that is. At 16th overall, the Nashville Predators would go for Trevor Connolly, playing in the Tri-City Storm of the USHL. And if you're looking for a player that's a high-risk, high-reward player, Trevor Connolly's right up your alley. Fantastically skilled, really dynamic with the puck, constantly creating off the rush, constantly finding ways around defensemen and through them. But it's really unpolished, kind of junior style game. He doesn't really use the middle as much. He's a bit more of your peripheral drive and go, pass at the last second and try to get a primary assist type of player.
Yeah.
Whereas other players in this draft are more kind of the intricate kind of give and go, play that more pro style hockey. So Conley's a big risk, but if his skill set is matched with like a developed pro game, oh my goodness, he could be really, really good. The other side of that is the character issues with Conley. We've heard a lot of rumblings around that, but until that's given more substance, I feel like it's still important to keep in mind that like this is a draft year person who is working his way up the rankings, who probably made some bad decisions earlier on, but we have to focus on the hockey for a second, just realize that this is a player who has a skill set to kind of climb the ranks really, really quickly and do it really well. So I would not be surprised at all, especially given that he was given a 5th overall ranking in NHL Central Scouting's list for the North American skaters, like above Cole Eiserman. Like, this is the swing that Nashville will want to be taking. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on a 24/7 news channel over on YouTube. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our prospects coverage for the year. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High. We hope you tune in next time.